The mansion's oppressive atmosphere thickened as Ellie Winters pressed deeper into the shadowed heart of the ancient structure. He moved cautiously, every step an echo swallowed and warped beyond reason, the sounds folding into one another like waves, crashing relentlessly against his resolve. His breath came shallow and quick in the stale air, the weight of silence so unnatural, and Devoured bearing down with a physical force he could scarcely comprehend. The hallway ahead stretched into darkness, its edges blurred by the trembling walls that seemed to pulse in time with a low, unsteady rhythm. Ellis' fingers tightened around his portable recorder, the device his only tether to a reality that was fraying at the edges. The faintest murmur of sound began to swell, a cacophony of whispers, creaks, and distant screams layered over one another in a chaotic symphony. But this was no ordinary noise. It pressed against his skin, an invisible tide pushing inward, bending the air and the space he occupied. Suddenly, the vibrations escalated into a crushing wave that hammered at his temples, and Ellie staggered, clutching his head as the mansion itself seemed to breathe, exhaling a dreadful resonance that warped perception and twisted the familiar into a nightmare landscape. Time dilated. Moments stretched and compressed as the sound's physicality became unmistakable, a tangible force that threatened to unravel the fragile threads of Ellie's mind. "It's here," he whispered to himself, voice trembling, the Devourer. Memories flickered, unbidden fragments of conversations with Mara, Harold's cryptic warnings, and the endless echoes of past inhabitants who had vanished or broken under the mansion's hunger. The entity was no mere ghost or spectre. It was a metaphysical predator born from the cumulative anguish and suppressed screams of those who had suffered within these walls. It fed on silence, consuming it to trap emotional and psychic energy within an endless reverberation of pain. Ellie's rational mind struggled to grasp the enormity of what he faced. The Devourer was everywhere and nowhere, an intangible presence that bent sound into a weapon and a cage. The walls pulsed with the entity's insatiable hunger, the silence it devoured replaced by a growing storm of noise that battered at his senses. Just then, a figure emerged from the shadows, Harold Crane, gaunt and weathered, his dark eyes reflecting the dim light like twin coals. "You see it now," Harold said quietly, his voice a gravelly whisper that seemed swallowed by the surrounding tumult. "The house is alive, and the Devourer feeds on all that is lost, the silence, the screams, the memories. It is the legacy of this place, a curse born of pain and forgotten anguish." Ellie nodded, swallowing hard against the rising tide of despair. "How do I fight something that isn't really there? Something that's part of the house itself?" Harold's gaze bore into him. "You must use its own nature against it. Sound is your weapon, but also your trap. Disrupt its feast, and you may weaken it. But be warned, the house will resist with everything it has." A cold shiver ran down Ellie's spine. He understood then that his expertise in sound engineering was not merely a tool for documentation, it was the key to survival. His mind raced through possibilities, frequencies that could destabilize the entity's hold, patterns of noise designed to fracture its coherence. But the risks were immense. Failure meant permanent entrapment in the mansion's sonic nightmare. As the walls throbbed with the Devourer's presence, Ellie steeled himself. The silence he sought was forever lost, consumed by the malevolent force that had haunted the mansion for generations. Yet within the suffocating noise, a fragile spark of hope flickered. He would fight, armed with knowledge and desperation, to reclaim control over the soundscape and, perhaps, his sanity. With a final glance at Harold, who faded back into the shadows, Ellie set to work. The battle for silence had begun. The corridor stretched endlessly, the flickering light casting grotesque shadows that danced upon the peeling wallpaper. Ellie's every footfall was amplified, bouncing chaotically off the warped walls, creating a dissonant echo that seemed to mock his presence. The air was thick with a hum of persistent, low-frequency vibration that resonated deep within his chest, as if the house itself had a heartbeat. He paused, pulling out his headphones, The soundscape was a maddening tapestry of distorted noises, the rasp of unseen footsteps, whispers that twined around his mind like serpents, and a rising swell of a guttural drone that threatened to engulf reason. Ellie's fingers trembled as he adjusted the dials on his equipment, searching for the frequency that might pierce the veil. Suddenly, the noise dropped to an eerie silence. The absence of sound was so profound it screamed in his ears. Ellie's breath caught. This was the Devourer's feast, the vacuum where silence once lived, now hollow and consumed. Then, from that void, a pulse emerged, a deep, throbbing hum that radiated like a living thing. It filled the space, a spectral presence pressing against the edges of perception. A shudder ran through Ellie. The mansion wasn't just haunted, it was predatory. It ingested silence, digesting it into madness and pain. "You cannot fight what you do not understand," a voice rasped from the darkness. Harold stepped forward, his gaunt face etched with centuries of sorrow. "But you can learn." Ellie swallowed hard, his mind racing. "Tell me everything." Harold's eyes flickered with a strange light. The Devourer was born from the torment of those who suffered here. It grew with their pain, feeding on the silence left behind by their screams. It is both the house and something beyond it, an echo turned predator. Ellie's heart hammered. Then it's tied to the memories and emotions trapped in this place. Yes, and until it is starved or severed, it will consume all who enter. The weight of that truth settled over Ellie like a shroud. The mansion was a living nightmare, a wound in reality that devoured peace and sanity alike. But knowledge was power. He looked at his equipment, resolve hardening. "I will use the tools of my trade. Sound is not just what it seems. It can destroy, disrupt, and maybe even save." Harold nodded slowly. "Then prepare yourself. The house will fight, and it will not surrender easily." As Ellie set about configuring his devices, the walls began to pulse again, the cacophony swelling into a deafening roar. The Devourer had sensed resistance. This was the beginning of a desperate battle, one where silence was the prize and sanity the price. Ellie Winters stood at the threshold of madness, armed with knowledge, haunted by loss, and driven by a fragile hope that sound could be both weapon and shield in the war against the devouring silence. The house waited, listening, and the Devourer fed. The oppressive hum subsided momentarily, leaving Ellie in a fragile quiet that felt like the calm before a storm. Every nerve in his body screamed for respite, but his mind was afire with plans and fears. He knew the entity's hunger would only grow more violent with his defiance. His hands moved deftly, setting up an array of speakers and microphones throughout the hallway, aligning them to emit carefully calculated frequencies. Each device was wired to a central console, where Ellie programmed pulses designed to disrupt the Devourer's hold, an acoustic counterstrike born from years of expertise and desperation. As he worked, fragmented memories of his wife and child flickered in the corners of his mind, their faces blurred and distant, like echoes trapped behind a veil. The mansion's soundscape seemed to draw upon these ghosts, twisting them into mournful wails that filled the air with sorrow and menace. Ellie swallowed the lump in his throat, steadying his breath. "I'm not just fighting for silence," he muttered. "I'm fighting for their peace." The first pulse was released, a sharp, piercing frequency that sliced through the ambient noise. The walls vibrated violently, the echoes convulsing as if wounded. Then, the Devourer responded with a surge of sound so intense it threatened to shatter Ellie's resolve. Pain exploded in his ears, visions flickering at the edge of his consciousness, twisted faces, screaming mouths, and the relentless, devouring void. But Ellie stood firm, gripping his console, eyes blazing with determination. The battle for the silence had begun in earnest, and Ellie Winters would either reclaim the quiet he sought or be consumed by the endless echoes forever. The house waited, its breath heavy and expectant, and the Devourer screamed. Ellie Winters sat in the center of the mansion's grand hall, surrounded by an intricate web of wires, speakers, and recording devices that he had painstakingly assembled over the past several hours. The room, suffused with the stale scent of aged wood and dust, felt alive as if the very walls were watching, waiting. The cold blue glow from his equipment cast long, warped shadows that danced on the peeling wallpaper, shadows that seemed to pulse with the house's unnatural rhythm. His fingers moved with precise urgency, calibrating the frequencies with the delicate care of a surgeon, but beneath his measured exterior, a storm of dread and determination churned. The plan was audacious, to weaponize sound itself against the devourer, the intangible predator that had fed on silence and sanity alike. Ellie had pored over his notes, his recordings, and his memories, searching for a vulnerability in the entity's sonic domination. He theorized that by generating a cascade of disruptive frequencies, he could destabilize the entity's grip on the mansion, forcing it into retreat, or at least buying himself time to escape. It was a gamble born from desperation, the last card in a game with stakes higher than life itself. As the first tones hummed through the speakers, a low, almost imperceptible vibration began to spread. The mansion seemed to exhale, a long, drawn-out groan that reverberated through the floorboards and walls. Ellie's breath hitched, his pulse pounding in time with the rising frequency. The oppressive silence that had once devoured the house now twisted in response, a vicious, snarling soundscape that clawed back. Suddenly, the walls shuddered violently, as if the mansion itself was convulsing under the sonic assault. The echoes that had long haunted the halls transformed into physical waves of sound, crashing against Ellie's ears and chest like an invisible tidal force. Pain flared sharply, radiating through his skull and down his spine. The vibrations distorted reality, the edges of the room blurred and warped. The air thickened, heavy with a tangible pressure that threatened to crush his mind. Ellie staggered but kept his footing, hands trembling as he adjusted the frequency dials, pushing the assault further. Each change sent ripples through the house, eliciting a symphony of chaotic shrieks and howls that echoed off the walls and into his very soul. Hallucinations swirled at the edge of his vision, fragments of past screams, shards of his own grief blurring the line between external attack and internal torment. "Come on," he muttered, voice raw, hold together. Just a little longer. Pain and resolve warred within him as the sonic storm intensified. He could feel the entity fighting back, its power rising with every decibel, but Ellie's knowledge of sound engineering became his weapon, a beacon of order in the chaos. The speakers vibrated at frequencies designed to interfere with the devourer's resonance, disrupting the energy it fed on, destabilizing its presence. Then, as if the mansion itself paused to catch its breath, a sudden eerie silence fell so complete it felt like a vacuum. Ellie's heart hammered painfully in his chest, every nerve on edge. The silence shattered with a sharp, piercing echo, a scream that reverberated through the halls like a blade, slicing the oppressive darkness. Ellie gasped, clutching the console, eyes wide with a fragile hope he had not dared to feel in weeks. Was this victory, or merely the calm before another storm? He couldn't say. But one thing was certain: the battle for silence, for sanity, was far from over. Outside, the night deepened, and the house waited, hungry for its next note. Ellie's ears still rang when he finally slumped back against the cracked wall, sweat and grime clinging to his skin. The equipment hummed softly now, a gentle pulse that seemed almost alive. He closed his eyes, willing his mind to steady, but the echoes lingered, whispers of screams caught in the folds of his consciousness. A soft knock at the door startled him. His fingers hovered uncertainly over the dials. Was it Mara, Benji, or another phantom from the house's dark history? He reached out, hand trembling, and the chapter closed on the sharp edge of uncertainty between hope and despair, sound and silence, life and madness. The mansion's walls began to hum low at first, a subtle vibration beneath the floorboards that Ellie felt in the marrow of his bones. But the hum escalated, deepening into a roar that seemed less sound than force. His ears ached as the frequencies warped around him, twisting into a cacophony that battered his senses like fists thrown by unseen hands. Every nerve screamed for reprieve, but there was none. This was the Devourer's crescendo, an onslaught of sonic violence designed to shatter him utterly. Ellie staggered, clutching the nearest wall as the air thickened with oppressive noise. The house was alive, every surface vibrating with the entity's relentless appetite. His vision blurred at the edges, sound bleeding into shadow, reality folding under the weight of the auditory assault. The voices his wife, his child echoed cruelly, warped and distorted into mocking laughter and desperate screams. His heart hammered, each beat a desperate plea for endurance. His breath came ragged, lungs burning as pain radiated from his skull to the tips of his fingers. Yet amid the chaos, a thread of clarity remained, the knowledge that he could fight back. Fingers numb but steady, Illy fumbled for his recording rig, his trembling hands calibrating the dials with precision born of obsession and desperation. The machine hissed and crackled, a fragile beacon amid the storm. Outside the maddening din, Mara's voice flickered in his memory, a lifeline of reason and care. But here, in the sonic abyss, reality twisted and fractured. Illy's mind splintered, hallucinations blooming like dark flowers in the ruined soil of his psyche. He saw the mansion breathe, walls bending and melting into waves of sound that pressed in on him, trying to erase his presence. He forced himself forward, each step a battle against the physical force of noise that slammed into him. His ears rang, blood pounding in his head as he unleashed the counter-frequency, a piercing, oscillating wave designed to disrupt the Devourer's feed. The house screamed back, an unholy chorus of distortion and rage. The walls quaked, cracks spidering across plaster and wood as the entity's grip faltered. Pain exploded behind his eyes, and for a moment, Ellie teetered on the edge of oblivion. But the machine's steady pulse cut through the madness, a rhythmic hammer against the tempest. He clung to that rhythm, to the fading memories of love and loss that fueled his defiance. The sonic abyss fought to consume him, but Ellie Winters was not yet undone. As the assault waned, leaving behind a fragile silence that hummed with uneasy promise, Ellie collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. The battle was far from over, but he had carved a crack in the Devourer's armor. The house groaned around him, alive with a restless hunger, but for the first time in days, Ellie glimpsed a sliver of hope amid the choking echo. Yet even as he lay there, battered and broken, the mansion whispered its terrible truth. Silence was a dream forever lost, and the echoes never died. Mara's car crunched over the gravel driveway, tires kicking up dust that caught in the weak afternoon light filtering through ancient oaks. She hurried toward the mansion's looming silhouette, each step weighed down by a gnawing dread that had been growing since their last fractured conversation. Inside, Ellie Winters was unraveling, tethered only by a fragile thread Mara was desperate to grasp. The heavy front door groaned as Mara pushed it open, the stale air thick with a tension that prickled her skin. She called out softly, "Ellie." "It's me, Mara." No answer. Her footsteps echoed down the narrow corridor lined with peeling wallpaper, the silence oppressive, yet laced with a faint, unnatural resonance that made her pause. Ahead, a flickering glow seeped from under the door of the control room. Mara's heart pounded as she pushed it open, stepping into a chaotic sanctuary of wires, screens, and glowing meters. Ellie sat slumped over a bank of equipment, his unkempt hair falling into tired eyes rimmed with shadows. The room pulsed with distorted sound waves that rippled through the air like invisible storms. "Ellie," Mara said gently, moving closer. "You don't have to do this alone. Let me help you." Ellie's head snapped up, eyes glassy but burning with a fierce resolve. "You don't understand," he whispered, voice hoarse. "The Devourer, it feeds on silence. If I don't fight it here, it will consume everything. Silence, memories, even me." Mara swallowed hard. "And what if this fight destroys you? You slipping away, Ely. This obsession, it's killing you." He shook his head, desperate. "No, I have to keep going. The house, it's alive. The noise, the echoes, they were weapons. I'm going to turn them back on the Devourer. It's the only way." She reached out, placing a steady hand on his trembling shoulder. Listen to me. You re not your pain, you re not your grief. This house is a trap, but you can escape it. Come back to the world. Remember who you are beyond this madness. Ellie's gaze flickered, the weight of her words piercing through the fog, if only briefly. I remember, he said, softly, but the silence, it's gone, and if I don't stop the devourer, it'll never come back. The room seemed to pulse with the mansion's breath low, oppressive waves of sound pressing in from all sides. Mara felt her chest tighten as the walls echoed Ellie's whispered confession, blurring the line between the man she cared for and the monster the house was creating. Promise me, she begged, voice breaking, promise me you'll be careful. Don't lose yourself completely. Ellie managed a faint, sad smile. I promise. The moment shattered as the mansion responded violently, a crescendo of distorted noise cascading through the walls, shaking the room and rattling the fragile glass of the monitors. Ellie's hands flew over the equipment, desperately tuning frequencies, each adjustment met with a barrage of hostile echoes that assaulted his senses. Mara braced herself, her presence a fragile island amid the chaos. I'm here, she whispered. You're not alone. But Ellie was already slipping away, lost in the sonic abyss where sound was no longer just vibration but a tangible, merciless force. As the cacophony swelled, Mara's heart clenched with helplessness, knowing that this was only the beginning of a battle that might claim them both. Outside, the mansion seemed to breathe, alive with a hunger that no plea could quell. And inside, Ellie Winters plunged deeper into the darkness, chasing a silence that might never return. The air hung thick with a suffocating pressure, the mansion itself groaning under the weight of the relentless sonic assault that Ellie had unleashed. Walls once solid now rippled and fractured like the surface of a disturbed pond, each crack pulsating in time with the maddening echoes that bounced through the cavernous halls. Ellie stood at the center of the chaos, his breath ragged, his hands trembling but steady as he adjusted the dials on his equipment. The feedback loop resonated violently, a concentrated scream of sound that tore through the fabric of the house's reality. The fractured walls reflected not only physical decay, but the breaking of time and space. Memories once locked in the silence devoured by the mansion, now surged forth in distorted fragments, ghostly images of Ellie's wife. Their smiles twisted by the house's cruel echo, and the haunting laughter of his child, warped into chilling wails. The soundscape around him was no longer merely auditory, but had become a physical force, clawing at his mind, threatening to unravel the last threads of his sanity. Ellie's scream joined the chorus, a raw, anguished cry that seemed to fracture the very air. The mansion responded, its walls vibrating in sympathy, amplifying his pain and grief into a tangible presence. He felt the devourer's oppressive force pressing in from all sides, an intangible wave of noise that distorted everything it touched. The sensation was like being submerged in a sea of static, the white noise drowning out reason and reality alike. From the shadowed threshold, Mara's figure emerged, her voice a fragile beacon against the storm.
Ellie, you have to stop this!
You re-breaking yourself? She pleaded, her words barely cutting through the cacophony. Her eyes, wide with fear and determination, locked onto his, grounding him briefly in a reality he struggled to hold. But Ellie's resolve was ironclad, forged in the fires of his obsession and grief. I can't stop now, he whispered hoarsely, fingers dancing over the controls, weaving a tapestry of sound designed to shatter the devourer's hold. The frequencies shifted, a precise calibration of destructive resonance that began to tear at the mansion's sonic core. The house convulsed violently, shards of plaster and wood falling like rain as the walls buckled under the assault. The devourer screamed a horrible, unwound wail that seemed to fracture the very fabric of existence. For a brief moment, silence fell like a fragile veil, a breath held between chaos and calm. Ellie collapsed to his knees, sweat pouring down his face, his ears ringing with the aftermath of the sonic battle. The mansion was quieter now, but the damage was irrevocable. His body ached, his mind fractured by the relentless noise, his vision blurred with tears and exhaustion. The echoes of the house still clung to him, whispering promises of madness and despair. Marek knelt beside him, her hand steadying his trembling shoulder. "You did it," she said softly, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her uncertainty. "But at what cost?" Ellie's eyes met hers, reflecting the haunted remnants of a man who had faced the abyss and returned forever changed. The mansion's fractured reality lingered in the air like a wound that refused to heal, a testament to the destructive duality of noise, communication, and annihilation intertwined. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the broken windows, casting long shadows across the shattered hall, Ellie knew one thing with brutal clarity. The silence he sought was gone forever, replaced by a resonance that would echo in his mind for all time. The house had fractured, but so had he, bound eternally to the reverberations of his own screams. And somewhere deep within the ruins, the devourer stirred, weakened but unyielding, its hunger for silence undiminished. The fractured walls whispered their maddening secrets, and Ellie Winters, battered but unbroken, faced the uncertain dawn of a world forever changed by noise and despair. The end was nowhere near,